All right, everybody. So, as always, on Fridays, mostly on Fridays, we're coming on live after my hit on News Nation. Today, I really want to kind of talk about this because there's a lot of conversations, online and, in private conversations around this the dye, red number 3, and the FDA's recent decision to ban it. And it was banned because of the carcinogenic tendency of red number 3 found in animal studies. So we talked about that a little bit for a few minutes on News Nation today with Marky Martin, and didn't get a chance to really kind of go through some of the stuff that I found. It's really, it's worth us talking through it. It's worth us being aware of some of this stuff. So I'm gonna, kind of course through some of this stuff with you right now. So if you're live, you'll get it. Let's set some questions. But obviously, I always just go ahead and post this on my page, on the Good Dr. Dave page. Okay, so the ban is to take place. It actually officially goes into place, but it won't really sort of come into real fruition until 2027 for food. And it won't take place in ingestible drugs until 2028. So the ban is now, it's giving companies, roughly, 3 years total, 2 for the food and then 3 for the drugs, to find something else, to change it. So I want us to all sort of think about what this means, what we're going to have to do currently, and what we'll have to look forward to in the future. So in my mind, when you take away, because the stuff is everywhere. If you look at red number 3, we've always seen that, F, D, and C, red, F, D, and C, yellow, F, D, and C, blue. What does that mean? F, D, and C is an FDA designation. It just means food, drug, and cosmetics. So that's a general designation that says that the FDA has looked at this and has approved it, right? So the quality is there, the safety is there, and they put it out. And it leaves a lot of people saying, hey, well, is the safety there, really? Because you approved it, and it's been approved for decades, but it turns out that it may not be safe. And so it caused me and the team over at News Nation to really dive into this a little bit more because we all have, children and we all have families that we don't want to suffer needlessly to something that is preventable, right? If we just have to stay away from an agent that causes cancer, let's stay away from an agent that causes cancer. So we talk about a lot of that. Let me just do one thing here. All right, so I think what I wanted to do was just kind of give you a little bit more information about the red number 3, and then kind of end with, hey, what do we do about it, right? So I'm gonna leave that for the end. What is red number 3? What is it? Many of the food colorings that are F, D, and C, like red, yellow, blue, those are all derived from petroleum. So when they refine petroleum and use it for gas or whatever, and then some petroleum jelly and some of these other things, they have stuff left, and a lot of these are derived from petroleum. So they take petroleum extract and then they do different chemical reactions to get these colors. And they go through a number of them. They do a number of experiments. There was red number 1, red number 2. Red number 1 and red number 2 were actually banned potentially because of their carcinogenic effect. So we kind of know from history, and those bans, I have it on here, those bans were quite a while ago. So red number 1 was banned in 1961. Red number 2 was banned in 1976. Red number 3, now banned, 2025. Red number 4 is not used in the United States, not approved in the United States. Again, probably because either a safety, concern or something like that. And I do want you to know that designation essentially means, and there's some nuances, but it essentially means that they it was the first one that they tried. So they took petroleum and they tried one experiment. Oh, well, that was red number 1. That was a good try. Red number 2, let's try a different experiment. Red number 3. So that's where the designation comes in. Currently, what we see is a lot of red number 3 and red number 40. Red number 40 is the most popular red dye that is currently used. And as I said on News Nation today, red number 40 is not, scot-free. It's not enjoying sort of, a clean bill, because there has been some research in test tubes and at the research bench that red number 40 can cause DNA damage. What does DNA damage do? DNA damage is what we think is one of the things that leads to cancer. So we want to be really, really careful about these things. And I'm going to go back to my note here. Okay, so now we have these things. They have been at least thought to cause cancer in animals. One of the studies showed that red number 3, which has petroleum derived, and then they put some iodine and do a bunch of different experiments with it. That petroleum, red number 3 can cause thyroid cancer. Thyroid is one of the main organs in your body that uses iodine. Also, one of the reasons why we put iodine in salt, because iodine deficiency can lead to some pretty gruesome diseases. So we just have it in salt, for example. It says iodinized salt, iodinized sodium chloride. So they use that, and then when they test that in animals, it caused some thyroid cancer in male rats particularly. But there's been some other studies that have been repeated and said, okay, this is a real problem in animals. But that study did not sort of get translated or done in humans, and there may be a number of reasons for that. But there have been groups, activism, all kind of other science around the fact that this could be a carcinogen. And it only recently got the push enough for the FDA to say, okay, let's get rid of this stuff. Marky made a really good point, was that it was actually taken out of cosmetics years ago. So they're not allowed to use red number 3 in cosmetics. Why? Well, because of the potential of its carcinogenic or other health, problems. And when I read, groups and talk to people, they feel betrayed. They really do feel like the FDA has not really been forthcoming with this, because we assume that when we eat a gummy or a cough syrup or whatever has this red number 3 in it, that the FDA has done due diligence enough to let me know if it's on my shelf that it's safe for me. And this starts to smack of conspiracy, impropriety, only out for profit. And you can understand why. If you are at the FDA and you happen to watch this video for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, you have to understand what people are saying. And my message would be to you, I'm imploring you to go back and understand what your communication channels are. One of the problems that we have in medical science and in research science at the bench is that we don't tell people what we're up to. We don't tell them why we've made decisions about it and give them some detail, partly because we think people won't understand. But that's the teacher's responsibility, not the student's responsibility. So we figure out a way to teach people what we know, and we talk more. One of the main problems in any frayed relationship is poor communication. The medical science community, including researchers, have a relationship problem with the American public. And the only way to mend that relationship, the only way to get the trust back, which is rooted in that communication, relationship, is to improve our communication. I think the FDA will have to come out and really explain what happened. Because there's somebody who says, here's the reason why 1, 2, and 3. The data weren't quality. It was only 3 rats. Tell us why we are now just coming to this. And tell us why we should trust you in the future. I know for a fact that the scientists at the FDA are not trying to toxify our bodies. You just have to tell us what you're going through. Let us ask you some questions. And I know that's not the norm, but the norm is getting us the kind of relationship that we have, and it leads to all kinds of problems. I talked about COVID last time. That was my message. That was a long message, but that's my message. That's why I'm doing live, because I can talk as long as I want on live. With that being said, I also want us as consumers, because at the end of the day, you can see from this, we may not always be able to sort of count on agencies and policies and laws to make sure we're healthy. That's just not going to be the way it's done for a very long time, at least in this country. We won't have a mandate to eat healthy. It has to be a broadly, widely adopted way of doing things. So I'm going to tell you at this point what I think we should do. I think we should start getting back in the habit of turning labels around and reading them. As a rule of thumb, the more stuff you see on a label, the ingredients, what's in the label, boy, the more likelihood that it's processed or ultra processed, right? Ultra processed just means, there are things that are in this food that were derived from food, then changed to put back into the food to, increase its shelf life, to make the flavor better, to, enhance the flavor. I said that. To change the color, make it brighter, make it more attractive. So I get that. I understand that. But there are ways, for example, for us to do that, to make things attractive, to make things, have shelf life, without poisoning and toxifying the American people. I often will hear and experience myself when I go to Portugal or Europe or, Dubai or wherever they say, you turn things around, and yes, they taste different. So you're like, what's the difference here? And you look, and there's 5 ingredients, all of which you can name. You can look at them and you say, oh yeah, I know what that is. But ours typically have a lot more ingredients. Why? Well, we probably want it to last a little bit longer on the shelf so that we as a company, for example, can profit a little bit more. We probably want it to be a little bit more enhancing so that people would be, have the tendency to buy it more. And I understand all of those things. And the challenge for the scientists, the food scientists at all of these places, is to figure out a way to do that in a healthy way. Period. That's it. Is it possible? The answer is yes. Do you have to go back and do something differently? The answer is yes. What you're going to find is that people are just going to stop buying it. And once that demand goes down, it's going to force you to go in there. Here's what I think. I think the company that really is going to get on with this is not going to wait for a groundswell from people to change. They're going to go out front and say, the color of the food that you've loved all these years is going to change. Here's why. We're going to use beets. Color from natural beets, for example, for our red. We're going to use paprika red. There are some natural ways to get red. And so it's going to look different and it's going to taste slightly differently. But we know that you'll still enjoy this and go on a campaign for it. That's where you should be. The company that does that, right? The parent company is what that does that is going to talk about stock price and market share and just profit. Try it. I know I sound like a maniac, but if you try it, you'll see that this current American population is looking for people who have our best interest at heart. And that just makes sense. There were a couple other things that I wanted to make it clear to you from my research, that in order for you to know that red number 3 is there, you've got to know what other names it goes by. So red number 3, FD&C, red number 3, things like erythrocene. Erythrocene is the chemical name that the scientists use. Erythro from the Greek root for red, erythrocyte, like red blood cell. Erythema, we say erythema when somebody gets red swelling, for example, around a swollen joint. So that's where that comes from, erythrocene. E127 in Europe, they use E127. And then there's a color index that has a number, 45430. Say, oh, okay, that's too much. And it might be too much, but I want you to be able to identify red number 3. You identify red number 3 and say, I'm not going to touch it. Now, with that being said, a ton of your favorite foods are going to have red number 3 in it until 2027. And you just have to be okay with not eating a known carcinogen. You just have to be okay with that. Like, I mean, it sounds ridiculous for me to say it, but that's exactly what it is. You have to be okay for me not to eat, I'm not going to do any brand names on here, but, go and look at the package, turn that package around and look for these designations. Is it red number 3? Is it red 40? Because red 40 is on the chopping block as well. And make a decision. Here is my big recommendation for all my patients that come in. Let's start chipping away at the amount of processed foods that we eat. Period. If it's in the pantry, chances are it's processed or ultra processed. If it's in the pantry, that means it can last for a long time. And to have shelf life like that, you've got to change stuff. You can't have an ear of corn and just sit it in your pantry and let it last for 2 months. It's not going to do that. Corn-derived things like cereals and stuff like that then get ultra-processed can last for a really long time. But is that ultra-processing, the technique of doing that, is that harming us long-term? And we don't even know. I did come across one article that was trying to explore the reason why we're seeing a whole lot of colorectal cancer in young people. Colorectal cancer was not a condition of 40 and 50-year-olds. I think Chadwick Boseman's diagnosis brought it to our attention as a public, like, what, young folks are developing this. And he was really young when he died. Imagine how old he was when it started in his body. Because, colorectal cancer can take a decade or more to actually turn into something that's really challenging your life. So the study said that it at least thinks that some of the additives are a reason for it. So what do? They take the additive and they look at animals and they say, what happens to the physiology of an animal's intestines when I put, an additive in it, a dye in it or something like that. And there's significant research there. But it's in animals because what's the likelihood that somebody's going to fund a study in humans about that? It's probably not that good. I had a question from a producer that was, we were getting ready for the segment this morning. And he said, well, why should we hang our hat on animal studies for stuff like this? But Dr. Dave, when you come on about other things, you tell us, hey, listen, this was only in animals. Let's take a step back before we, make a generalization that it also happens in humans. And I said, that is a really great point. But here are the stakes. The stakes are that we're saying that something has repeatedly been shown to cause cancer in animals, in test tubes, at a research bench. Do I want to do that experiment and just try that out? Let me say, oh yeah, that's only in animals. It can cause all kinds of cancers. Let me just, I don't know if I believe that. Let me just keep eating whatever my little chips are that have this stuff in it. I'm just going to keep going. Not for me and mine. And I'm almost willing to bet that you would say the same thing for you and yours. Here's my ultimate recommendation. Leave the processed foods out as much as possible. Read the labels, identify colors, reds, especially red 40 and red number 3. Red number 3 has been banned. Red number 40 is under scrutiny. And just decide to do something else. Mark, you say, well, what do you do for Valentine's Day? I don't care about Valentine's. I do care. My wife's going to watch this. I do care about Valentine's Day, but not to the extent that I'm going to give her the little candy heart that's got red number 3 in it and be like, oh, here you go, babe. Sign that will. Let's get the insurance ready because when you eat this little heart that's got red. No, I'm being silly, but you get what I'm saying. Come on, it's not worth it. What things can we come up with for Valentine's Day that don't have red number 3 in it? Come on, it doesn't take that much creativity. So let's not poison ourselves on purpose. The ultra-processed foods, particularly processed meats, have been categorized in Group 1 for the World Health Organization and the IARC, which is their sub-branch, as a Category 1 carcinogen. So we know that the process of processing food, just the process, can cause cancer. It's a carcinogen. They don't even play around with it. It causes cancer in humans. Anything that can cause cancer in humans, we shouldn't eat it. Processed food, that's your bacons, your turkey bacons, your sausages, your hams, deli meats, stuff in a can. All of that stuff lumps into processed meats, and they do go through a process. And some of it is because in the processing technique, they're not putting the carcinogen in the technique. It's just a consequence of the biochemical reaction. So you put something in there and then a bunch of benzene comes out, right? You put something in there and some acetaldehyde comes out. Well, benzene is a carcinogen, group 1. Acetaldehyde is a carcinogen, group 1. That's why I talk about alcohol. Like, that's why alcohol contributes to so much cancer, is because it's got these known carcinogens, not from the actual molecule, but when the molecule gets broken down. So some of these processed foods, it's not from, they put it in there. It's after you go through the process, something gets derived. There's a chemical reaction. So I think that we should leave it alone. And say, well, are you going to be more scientific than that? No, I'm not. But here's what I'll say. I'm being silly. Here's what I'll say. If you go to the Blue Zone, so there is this documentary on Netflix about the Blue Zones. It's called Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones. We play it in every last room in my office as patients wait. And what you'll know is that these are some of the regions in the world that populations live the longest. And in Japan, they have that largest percentage of people who live a really long time. So I think they have something like 560 odd octogenarians, not octogenarians, centenarians, 100 years old, 560 something per million. That's a lot of 100-year-old people walking around. And it turns out that a large majority of them are well and active and functioning, and they're not ill. So you say, well, then, how does this population who has an average life expectancy is well past ours is still in that 76, 78, male, female. Theirs is like 87, 88. That's the average, meaning folks are going way up into the hundreds, and then some people don't do well. Okay. But there's got to be something. There's got to be an exposure that they don't expose themselves to. What is that exposure? Let's go see what they eat. That's what this documentary does. Let me see what they eat. Let me see what they do. And let's see is this just a genetic lottery because they live in, Okinawa, Japan, No, because it's also in Sardinia, and it's also in Costa Rica, and it's also in these other places where the genetics are not that similar. Yeah, we're humans, but the genetics are not that similar. And then it's in Loma Linda, California, right? So there's something about the practices, the behaviors, and the actions, the daily habits. And if we can do what they do, then we are likely to get what they get and have what they have in terms of longevity. Okay, so I would recommend people go watch that. There's a 4-episode documentary, Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones. Really, the through line in there is leave all that ultra processed stuff out. Okinawa, they have hardly anything that's processed, and they certainly don't eat any ultra processed foods. We are exposing ourselves to known carcinogens. And when we expose ourselves to known carcinogen and we're scratching our heads, well, why are young people having more cancer? Okay? All right, good. So that's my recommendation. I want you to read those labels. Stay away from processed foods as much as you can. My trainer said, listen, me and my wife, we decided we're just going to go in the pantry and just take out all the processed foods. Boom, we felt, healthier. The kids were, less groggy. They slept better. They, just all of these healthy things. And I would challenge you to do that in 2025. If you're going to thrive in 2025, let's take out the processed foods. I'm going to challenge you to do that. Let's all do that, right? Let's limit the processed foods as much as we can. And yes, I'm asking you to change that breakfast because with all the processed food. And yes, I'm asking you not to eat these, healthy bars. You think this is a healthy bar, but when you turn the package over, it's got like a whole, pamphlet of ingredients in it that names that you don't know what that is. Last time you saw that was in biochemistry or organic chemistry. Like nobody knows what some of this stuff is. I want you to leave it alone. Let's start this. Let's do it for 30 days. We're going to leave the processed foods out for 30 days. What's processed? I turn it over and I see a bunch of ingredients on it. It's in a package. It lives in my pantry or in a cabinet. It lives in the grocery store or the market in the middle of the grocery store. Things that have a long shelf life by definition are processed. Corn is not going to last as long as that cereal is going to last. Regular kind of chocolate is not going to last for 17 years like that. Like we got Halloween candy from last year. You open it up, it looks perfectly fine, right? Well, how do you do that? Like, what is that? Anyway, so let's do it. 30 days, no processed food. Change your life. Change your risk for having any of this nonsense that we're talking about. I want you to also know that in 2027, when this stuff comes into effect, some of your favorite foods are going to look different, taste different. Be okay with that. Have your food tasting like the food in Portugal, right? And you're like, why do these corn chips taste so different than the corn chips that I eat in Atlanta? Well, because they don't have all the stuff in there. The last thing that I'll say is for corporations and companies who are scratching their heads. There's a lot, man. This announcement is putting a bunch of companies in a tailspin. Their scientists are going back to the bench. There's a lot of meetings and Zooms and stuff going on because they got to get this stuff together in 2 years. Red number 3 is everywhere. Okay? And what I'll say to them is you can still make a profit and do this the right way. You can still have market share and not toxify the American public. You can do it. Go get the scientists that are smart enough to do it. Use some AI. You know what I mean, come on. And then us on our side, let's just force them to change it by not buying it. If you don't buy it, they're like, oh my goodness, there is no demand for it. Let me go back to the drawing board. So the locus of control, right here. We get to do that. 30 days, no processed food. Processed means turn it around, bunch of stuff on a label. It lives in my pantry for a long time. I'm just gonna leave it out. So fresh things you can cook, but don't eat the processed, all right? Good. Any questions? Let's see if anybody has any questions here. No questions. Let's see. Yes. Good. Yes, Doc. Yes, absolutely. Let's do it. 30 days. And your family, listen, if you got a 10-year-old upstairs, you got 16-year, you got little kids, it's going to be hard to do it. But if you tell a 16-year-old why you're doing this, they'll be like, oh, I'll help you do it. I'll help you do it. Be really careful of it. Any questions before? Give us yes. Christy, hey, Christy, good morning. Give us a sample breakfast. Let's do it. Let's imagine that we're going to stay away from all processed food. And, in American culture, in the particular regions, you feel like you have to have meat. You got to have some meat for breakfast or else it's just not breakfast. That's an American cultural construct. There are places all over the world that have no meat for breakfast, and then there are other places that they only eat meat. Like a German breakfast is like meat, cheese, more meat, okay. But that's beside the point. Anyway, so let's do that. I happen to like greens in the morning. And so I could take, 2 big handfuls of spinach, a little bit of tablespoon of olive oil, which is great for you, by the way. Saute that. You know how quickly spinach sautés? Like a minute and a half. Boom. So you saute that up. Some people like mushrooms. My 10-year-old loves all kinds of mushrooms. Boom. You chop up, 1 or 2, criminy mushrooms. Portobello, I don't care. Put that. Now you've got a meat-like texture with your spinach. Boom. Put a little bit of flavor on that. Boom. I've got that. What do I eat with that? There's nothing wrong with eggs for the right person at the right time. There's some people who shouldn't eat eggs at all. Now you take a boiled egg, you lightly scramble an egg. Boom. Now I've got a really good, healthy, and satisfying breakfast. Great. Well, let's go to another one. Let's just get some plain old rolled oats. Are the oats processed? Yeah, well, they got processed from their original state to be in that, but they're not ultra processed. So when you turn over your oatmeal box, right? I'm not talking about these little packets with all the stuff in it. Okay, do that experiment. If you eat oatmeal at your home, go to your Google and pull up just regular rolled oats and the nutrition label. They're all published online. Read how many things are on there. 2, rolled oats and like a little bit of salt or something, right? Go to the one under the package. It's got, maple this and cinnamon that. Turn that package over and read how many things are in there. Seriously. It'll blow your mind. Then look at the nutrition. Look at the sugar that's added. Look at the calories. Look at all of that. It'll blow your mind. So if I want a non-savory type breakfast, I might go and get just rolled oats. And how long does it take to make oatmeal? 7 minutes on the stovetop. So you're not losing time. It's not like, oh my God, I don't have time to do all that. Yes, you do. Do you have time to avoid health risks like cancer? The answer, absolutely. So that's another example of it. And you grab a piece of fruit. There are people who are trying to stay away from carbohydrate. That first meal that I described is one of them. Well, I don't like mushrooms, Dr. Dave. What do? Well, did you have chicken breast last night? Sure. But I'm going to carve off a little bit of the chicken breast that I had last night, put a little teaspoon of olive oil, put a nice little crisp on it, and I'm going to have chicken breast, sauteed chicken breast with my spinach, with my eggs. It doesn't have to be processed to have meat in the morning, but I'm also imploring you that you don't have to have meat in the morning. So there's options for us out there if we just go outside this box that we're in, okay? So that's a really great question. Overnight oats, absolutely. You can have overnight. If you haven't done overnight oats, you're missing it. It's not processed. You make that, you put it in the fridge, and it's a delightful, cool treat. If you want to make it room temperature, put it in the fridge overnight, right? And then set it out before you eat it. So overnight oats, that's another one. Are frozen vegetables and fruits, or are frozen vegetables or fruits even meats or even meats processed? Oh, good. All right, Rev. So great question. Now I understand. I should put my glasses on. Okay. Oh, that made it worse. Okay. So our frozen meats, our frozen vegetables processed. They are processed in the sense that you change it from the original state, but it's not ultra processed. So what they do is they take blueberries and flash freeze them. That's not bad. All that is frozen, right? So fresh frozen vegetables and fruit is on the table as far as I'm concerned. Because to your point, Rev, you speak to affordability and practicability, how feasible it is for me to eat like this if I got to run to the market 3 days a week. So yes, you can have that. But the meats are processed. So for example, let me back up, because if it's just frozen meat, so for example, you go and get chicken wings, and then you freeze them. Well, that's not really the process that we're talking about, because the ingredients are the same. What's in there? Chicken. If you do the same thing for any of the meats, freezing them is not a problem. The problem becomes when they prepare it for you. So they have your salmon, and then they put all kinds of stuff on it for you, put it in a box, freeze, dry wrap it, and then put it in the freezer. That's where it's processed. You're going to turn the package over and read, because they have to tell you what's in there. So I like that question. Thank you so much. Frozen meats. Yes, thank you. So we kind of talk about freezing them yourself or pulling them from a freezer. That's not necessarily processed. That's going to be, if you happen to eat red meat, a T-bone steak that you put in the freezer, what's in there? Well, T-bone steak. So that one doesn't Okay. How about now? Should be okay. The thing just went off on me. Can you hear me now? Should be okay. Should be okay. Let me know if you guys can hear me. And we're back. Rev Kev. Everybody, Reverend Kevin Ross at the top there. All right. So, yeah. So I'm not going to, I'm just going to post everything. If you have questions, let's pop them up. Otherwise, we'll say goodbye until next time. But this is something I want you to be thinking about for your families, getting your tweens and your teens involved in. Because boy, do they know how to, get some things going at your home when it comes to this stuff, right? If they find out dad's not supposed to be doing something, they're all over you. Get your family involved in this so that they also know when they're out on their own, man, maybe this little, my favorite candy, maybe I have to find an alternative to it, okay? All right, people, have a fantastic weekend. God is good. So let's enjoy all of the bounty that's out there, and I will see you guys next time. I'm gonna wait for about 10 seconds before I end. Let's see. All right, good. Thanks for